I call to order the meeting of the February 14th Portsmouth Community Network Broadband Authority. Welcome everybody back. Haven't seen you in a while, since September last year. But we're here to handle the business that is before us, and we'll begin with a roll call.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Barnes is absent. Mr. Glover?
Yes.
Mr. Hugel?
Here.
Mr. Moody is absent. Mr. Tillage is absent. Dr. Whitaker?
Present.
Mrs. Lucasberg?
Here. Okay, we need to, second order of business is to adopt our minutes, and the packet is before you of our September 13th meeting. If you see those, if there's any changes to be noted, we'll hear those now. If none, entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and second, and we'll have a roll call vote.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Barnes is absent. Mr. Glover?
Yes.
Mr. Hugel?
Aye.
Mr. Moody is absent. Mr. Tillage is absent. Dr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Lucasberg?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Next on our agenda is our election of officers, and we only have 4 members here. But we will proceed.
And
with
just
the-
for your information, you need to elect a chair, a vice chair, a secretary, and a treasurer. And I'll explain treasurer once we get to that one.
Here comes Mr. Moody's.
Okay.
Chair, vice chair, secretary.
So I thought the bylaws directed that the city clerk was the secretary and the
Yeah.
CFO was the treasurer.
We still have to be elected in, even though we're,
Okay.
even though it kind of designates us, you got to be elected in.
All right.
Okay. Is there a motion for chair?
I make a motion that we continue on with Vice Mayor Lucas Burke as the chair, since she's done such a stalwart job.
I second that.
Okay. Any unreadness on that motion? Okay. We'll call the roll. Mr. Barnes is absent. Mr. Glover?
Yes.
Mr. Hugel?
Aye.
Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Mr. Tillage is absent. Dr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Lucasberg?
Yes.
Congratulations, you're the chair.
Thank you. Thank you. All right.
And you can run the rest of
No,
the
okay. Then our next office that we need to fill is vice chair. Is there a motion for vice chair?
I nominate Mark Hugel.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Mr. Barnes is absent. Mr. Glover?
Yes.
Mr. Hugel?
Aye.
Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Mr. Tillage is absent. Dr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Lucasberg?
Yes.
Okay. And
Congratulations.
secretary?
All right. Is there a motion to appoint our secretary? This is-
So I move consistent with the bylaws that the city clerk be our secretary.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay. Okay, we'll call the roll.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Barnes is absent. Mr. Glover?
Yes.
Mr. Hugel?
Aye.
Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Mr. Tillage is absent. Dr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Lucasberg?
Yes.
Okay.
And our next office to fill is treasurer.
Treasurer.
And
And the city manager is recommending that that be Mr. Trey Burke, who is our budget manager.
I second that.
we remove, we have a motion.
And a second.
Move and a second, okay. Mr. Moody and Mr. Shannon Glover, second. We call the roll.
Yes, ma'am.
I just have a
Question?
question.
Yes.
So the bylaws are calling for the CFO, so we can bypass the bylaws and appoint someone other than the CFO?
It can be, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's the CFO or city manager designee.
Okay, all right.
Are we good?
We good?
Okay. Mr. Barnes is absent. Mr. Glover?
Yes.
Mr. Hugel?
Aye.
Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Mr. Tillage is absent. Dr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Lucasberg?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. We have duly elected all of our officers for the 2023 year.
Yes, ma'am.
And we'll continue with our agenda as printed. And next up is the public hearing on proposed rates that was listed in the news article paper. And do we have a speaker? We have one registered speaker, Ms. Joanne Clark. Is she here? There she is. Okay. If you will come to the podium. And welcome, ma'am. And you have 5 minutes, 3 minutes to present.
Okay. I may be late to the party, but I have a question, and if it's going to take a lot of information, maybe you could just hand me off to someone else at another time. First of all, I understand that this ring or broadband is going to be throughout the city. Right now, its origin is at 164. Is that where it's located? Along 164?
That's part of the area.
Okay,
Yes.
for our area, right?
For Portsmouth,
For us. And so if I wanted to partake in this, the $125 a month, what exactly would I be getting? I mean, just kind of paraphrase what it is I'm buying.
Okay. So the $125 you're speaking to?
The budget.
Is for the fiber that you would purchase as a user of fiber. Kelsey, can you elaborate more?
Sure. So these are dark fiber rates. So this isn't internet service. This
Right.
is if you're, a data center or somebody like that, and you want to buy bulk infrastructure so that you can attach your own equipment and light it up. So this isn't really residential service at this point. That's a future discussion.
Okay, so I'm a little confused because I thought you said someone said it was going to connect to public housing eventually. Is that not a residential service line?
It will allow the public housing to have connectability to be able to use it at some future point.
So the citizens throughout the city don't get the same access points?
It was set for places that were underutilized, that didn't have access points to be able to connect to fiber, whatever use. Right now it's dark fiber, which means it's not lit, which means it doesn't provide any service for you to use Wi-Fi or internet services, but at some future point it will be lit up. I see Mr. Moody has some.
Well, I was going to just add, I don't think all the details have been worked out on that yet. Ms. Clark, is that correct, Ms. Syringa?
Yes. We're still on.
Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking that it would be a wonderful draw for the citizens to have that luxury, because I pay way too much money for internet, and I know a lot of my friends do.
Right.
And for me, it's, I guess, part of my vacation money, so I can watch Hallmark and whatever. And so I was just wondering, that would be a great lure for a lot of citizens and put some smiles on their faces. So maybe y'all will consider something like that, maybe having hubs in different areas and have the ability, particularly since in my neighborhood, we live really close. We're about 1.5 miles from where the actual ring is. Maybe that would make certain hubs would be accessible to the citizens in the future.
So the primary purpose was for us to determine if our rates were fair and equitable with other entities similar to what we're doing, and then all of the other details will come forth.
Okay. Well, I will
Yeah, Dr. Whitaker, I'm sorry. Yes.
Ms. Clark, the issue that you are bringing up as far as making this accessible to citizens, we haven't met in several months, but one of the issues that was raised during our previous meetings was that with the amount of investment that we're putting into this, that there should be some benefit to our citizens. And so that is something that had been discussed as far as making it accessible. I know that we need some follow-up on where these areas are in some underserved communities. But Ms. Swearinger, it's been months. Swearinger. If you could, this may be for future business topics, because I did want to get updated on where we are on that. So if you hang around some, you may get some answers to what you're asking in our
Well, good,
discussion.
good, great. Well, thank you so much for
Thank you
giving
for
me an
coming.
opportunity to ask the questions, and I look forward to hearing some answers.
Great. Thank you for joining us today. All right. Okay, next up is what we've all been looking for, an overview of the city's fiber ring. It's been since September we last met, and I know that the regional has had some meetings, and we have been on a hiatus, for lack of terms. But here we are, Portsmouth Community Network updates. And I guess Attorney Swearinger, are you going to lead that, or Mr. Hayes?
I'm going to do the presentation today.
Okay.
My name is Kelsey Swearinger. I'm Assistant City Attorney here, and I'm just going to give you a brief overview of this authority, the legal history of where we are, a little bit about the regional authority and how the regional authority affects this one, because it's been a little bit and we have new members. So, to back up, we are here because Portsmouth has its own city fiber ring, and that was part of the 2018 CIP. The primary reason that Portsmouth went ahead and did this is for internal city cost savings, because paying Cox to come out to each individual building and provide internet service was getting extremely expensive, and had some studies done that showed if we built our own ring and just had Cox essentially pump in internet on a wholesale level, that would give us lots of cost savings. It pays for itself in 10 years. We get better security and better speed for city uses. In addition to that, because fiber operates based on strands, so however many strands you have, that's kind of the capacity of the fiber. And putting in the amount of strands that the city needed just for its own purposes versus future-proofing it, putting in lots of excess capacity, has a very negligible cost difference. So when the city installed or did the construction for the ring, it built in a ton of extra capacity. And now we have the ability to leverage some of that extra capacity to benefit Portsmouth citizens and businesses. The one technical bit that I'm going to talk about, it's not that technical, it's just the difference between dark and lit fiber service, because there are legal implications to this. So lit fiber service are individual fiber strands that have information passing, so data going through it. You actually have light passing through those strands, and it's hooked up to equipment that can emit light. Dark fiber service is just fibers that have no light passing, there's no information going through, it's just infrastructure. So as an illustration, we have the difference between, for dark fiber service, is just having a pipe underground that could have water running through it, but does not, and is not hooked up to equipment that could pump water through. As you can tell, I know a lot about water service, that's the technical term. And lit service would be the equivalent of, you have that same pipe that actually has water passing through. So back in 2020, Council formed this authority under the Wireless Services Act, which is the enabling legislation in the Virginia Code. This authority is an entirely different entity from the city. So while the board of this authority are all city council members, the reason why staff refers to you as members here and not as council people is because here you are members. And we want to keep those entities separate because they do different things. So first, the city owns the fiber ring and all the infrastructure. It was a CIP, so that means that the title ownership is all in the city's name. The intention of creating this authority is that the city would just lease the fiber strands this authority needs to accomplish its goals to the authority, but at all times the city will maintain full title to the asset. The reason for this authority is because the city can only provide dark fiber to its citizens. So the city can't light up fiber, it cannot pay for internet service essentially for its citizens. Whereas an authority can provide both dark and lit fiber, and so it has a lot more flexibility to do projects to benefit citizens and businesses and can partner with other entities that can help that. So some of the projects that this board has looked into in the past and council has as well has been to provide Wi-Fi at affordable housing campuses and to issue an RFP, leases similar devices to attract more internet service providers, increase competition, to lower costs and increase availability of internet for residents. There is one limitation to Portsmouth Ring as it stands right now that I think is really important to mention, and that is that we still need to have a connection from Portsmouth Ring to the internet as a whole in order for you to be able to connect to the internet while on Portsmouth Ring. So the closest location to do this is the Internet Hub in Virginia Beach, which is right by the cable landing station. At least that's the best one that's close by. So for Portsmouth's own municipal needs, its solution is that once the ring is all up and running, it pays Cox to come in and just pump in wholesale internet to its ring. But that only serves the city's own municipal needs. So for the purposes of this authority, if you're looking to
Expand out.
issue an RFP, attract other businesses or internet service providers, if they ride our ring, next page, and this is a map of the ring, if they were to ride this ring, it would not go to the internet because there's no internet hub here. They'd have to use their own infrastructure or do the same thing and pay Cox to come in and pump the internet into their strands. Until we have that connection, which they'll be able to achieve once the regional ring is built, and I'll go over that in a minute. But until we have that connection, we're going to have a very hard time attracting a lot of those businesses that have those large data needs because it's not going anywhere right now.
Right.
Right. I think we had a question here.
Yeah, you mentioned Cox, Ms. Syringa. Obviously, everybody knows there are other providers out there, Verizon. Are we bound by an agreement where we have to utilize Cox, or can we put an RFP out?
We can. It's essentially for our needs, for our being the city. For the city's needs, from what I understand, it's been Cox simply because of the location of our ring. It's too far away from where Verizon is, so it's cost prohibitive really for us to work with them for our own ring. But you're right, there are other entities out there that in theory could provide service.
But Cox is the only viable
right now,
entity?
yes.
Okay, due to location.
Correct. I think they just have a much larger footprint, so if you happen to be in a location that Verizon already is at, then you do have that option. But I guess from where our nodes are or whatever, that's the only one that makes sense.
Yeah,
We say it's not cost prohibitive. Is that on their end or our end?
I just don't have it.
In other words, Verizon due to their location,
Right, I don't
wouldn't
think
be
they,
interested?
right, they're not interested
Okay.
in doing a build-out to the place that we would need them to build out to, and then it would cost us a lot more money.
Okay, so on both ends, it's
I-
not feasible.
Yeah.
So there was another provider in the area that had introduced themselves to this market, Segra, but since Cox bought that company.
Imagine that. huh?
The monopoly.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, Mr. Hugo.
So I'll go back to the first page that said we installed the fiber ring to produce savings inside the city to connect city buildings. So is there anything, and then the second page said we can't light up the dark fiber. Well, so we have internet, and I don't know what the infrastructure looks like, but let's just say the internet comes here and the server for the city is here. What precludes us from using dark fiber to attach here to all the other city locations where we use our internet connection here and light up the fiber to the city ops center and other places? Anything that precludes that?
We can light up our own, we can light up fiber for our own purposes, so that's not a problem. What you can't do is have lit fiber service for citizens or any third party. So, yeah, the whole plan is that we are lighting up the strands that we need for all municipal purposes.
Okay, and is that plan in progress?
Yeah, that's coming. But I just wanted to make sure that we understand that it's, we're really, one of the things that it seemed like people were kind of going back and forth with, we're not Cox Cable.
I got that.
So that's why it's more for the city. And then outsource or buying fiber strands to be able to do other things with companies. But just so we're clear that we're not in the business of being in that business. So that's why it would be more of what we're doing for Portsmouth.
Okay. And then when the Virginia Beach hub it lights up, I guess it's not lit now, is that true?
Right.
Okay, so when that lights up, we could run infrastructure there and plug in, and we wouldn't need Cox or Verizon or any other internet
you
service
still
provider. We're
an internet
basically
service
lit
provider.
with internet service the same as Cox is lit with internet service that they plug us into.
Yeah.
Yes?
The simple explanation is that when you get to the hub, it's not that you don't have any internet service provider, but now instead of having two options, you have dozens, and
Okay.
it's a lot cheaper. That's the simplest way.
Okay.
Dr. Whitaker, and then
Are we using internet and Wi-Fi as the same thing here?
No. So Wi-Fi would be kind of a subset, not subset of internet, but just a method of transmitting.
Right. Well, the reason I'm asking is because when we said we're not in the business of providing internet service, you weren't referring to Wi-Fi service there.
No, like I was referring to, like, we're not Cox Cable for the city. So we are the city. That's why you all are the authority to be able to do outside, but the city is like, we're not treated as Cox Cable. We're not in the business of me going to your house and saying, I need you to have internet service through the city of Portsmouth, and here's a contract and agreement per resident for us. We are in the business of connecting as a city to city buildings. And if you want to, as an authority, be able to sell strands to someone else, that's the authority.
Okay.
But we're not, I can't give you internet service as
I got you.
Mimi Portsmouth.
I got you.
and Mr. Moody.
You know, I think it would be good for the public and for the authority here when we, at this meeting, when we say "we," I think we should refer to either the authority
or the city. Right.
Okay.
Keep it straight, because
Right.
the "we" gets, sometimes I don't know whether the "we" means the
Yes.
authority or "we" means the city.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
And I go back to what I think Councilman Hugel was asking about. And I think, Ms. Terry, you said we aren't competing with, or we aren't going to compete with Cox, which we all know that. But does the we include the authority?
No, we includes the city.
There you go.
Right.
So the authority can
might want
do
to do
exactly that.
Yeah, that's why I say the authority
Okay.
can do the strands.
And that's why I suggested
Yeah.
the
Differentiate.
the city and the authority.
Right. Miss-
I think the confusion is because you're all
Right.
members of the
Just what he said.
council, which are all sitting as members of the authority.
Right.
So there's a hard separation.
Mr. Glover.
Chair.
And so I go back to the whole premise that we did this. The city, the city set up this whole system is because when we looked at what we were spending, and correct me if I'm not in the right lane, when we looked at what we were spending on the services, it became an issue. First, because we were spending more money and we were getting slow service. We weren't getting the service for the money we were spending. Hence, we took a look at it comprehensively and said, hey, look, if we do our own thing, what we can do then is kind of pay for our own service that we need. And in doing that, there's a game plan that will make us whole financially.
In 10
where,
years.
right, in 10 years, where we won't have to pay those dollars anymore. The first point that I wanted to make. So I understand where we're going with this, but sometimes I think the conversation gets to moving in a different direction than what our main premise was. In addition to that, and I've said this before, the we gets confused with the authority because in my mind, based on what I've heard and looked at, we, the council, should not be the authority.
I second that.
And the reason we should not be the authority, because ultimately the decision-making body, whether or not we move forward with what we're going to do, does rest with council. However, having an authority that is comprised of individuals that have the expertise in these areas make us a stronger entity, because those folks that do this, that work in this, the subject matter experts, they'll be able to bring all of this information as it relates to dark fiber, how we tie in, what we do. What we're experiencing, I don't know, I'm speaking for myself. You know, this is internet, high-speed technology 101 in a lot of ways. To me, the city council shouldn't be tasked with that. There are too many potholes and too many moving parts. What we should do is what we do with other boards and commissions. We should disband this thing as an authority for council and have it created as an authority with competent and capable citizens in the city of Portsmouth that bring those skill sets. They confer with us and we confer with them on the matters that we need to. At the high level of approvals, they still got to go through city council, so we're still in the loop. But that's why I said, because we take a lot of time and energy to go through the basic stuff that we really don't need to be involved in. That's just my 2 cents, and that doesn't mean we can't still get the policy things done that we require to get done, like making sure that our low-income communities have access to internet, which I support 110%. But at the end of the day, that's where we should be as a council operating, because people are getting confused. I'm confused. And I think, to be fair, that's how it should be set up.
And I think as we get farther down the road, I could see a situation where we're going to be conflicted. You know, we're wearing two hats here. As an authority, we can establish policy, and as a council, we might be asked to defend that policy. So that's not a good position. And I don't think for citizens that's a healthy position. I agree with the mayor. I think it should operate just like EDA, PPIC. I think those are good models that have worked and served us well. And I think we need, I think after the policy, after we've nailed down the basic policy, I think we'd be best to back out of it and appoint people who do have that expertise.
And that was the whole purpose of us coming in as the authority to start up, and at some point, we were going to transition to that place where we are appointing board members to this. I don't know where we are in that process right now. I know we were waiting for an RFP process. We were waiting for us to be able to, lay the groundwork for all of the policy. I think we are close enough where we can start moving in that direction. And Madam City Manager and Attorney Sweringer and City Attorney, if you think otherwise, if you let us know where we are in the process to where we can begin to move in that direction, then I think we would be best served in doing that.
Yeah, and it would take a resolution, because right now, if we're talking about, based on the direction that we first started talking, so to set it up like like EDA or PPIC, just to keep it simple, a resolution would have to be done, just to know that council members are like liaisons on those commissions. And
Right now, the bylaws don't provide for a liaison to be a part of it.
Right.
It's just the authority. So
Right.
to keep a council member as a part of the group, we would need to do that similar to what you described with PPIC and EDA. But right now, what can happen is the members can resign, and then an appointment is made like we do in any other authority through council, and all other processes and procedures will continue forward.
but there would have to be a consensus of this board to be able to do that.
No, council.
Council.
Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Whitaker and then Mr. Huber.
Anybody can resign.
Right.
Okay. Dr. Whitaker.
There are two schools of thoughts on that, and of course, the mayor has expressed his school of thought in several meetings. I disagree. I don't think that the boards that you all have referenced, EDA, PPIC, none of those have persons up there who are experts in those areas. Those are just citizens who agree to serve. I don't think that it's not an issue of putting experts up here. I continue to say that this is an issue of access to information. And I think that what is being expressed is from certain interest groups who want access to information. So it's not about whether it's an issue of competency, it's an issue of access, as it has always been. And so the question becomes, who will be sitting on these boards who have access? And so the competency is a distraction. That's not the real issue. It's because we don't have that litmus test for EDA, PPIC, Portsmouth Redevelopment and Housing. We don't put that litmus test out there. And so why all of a sudden is there a competency litmus test? Because competency is a distraction. It's about access to information. This particular body has a lot of potential, particularly business-wise. And so that's what it's about. And I just want to make sure that that's put on the table and not the distraction of competency.
Okay. Mr. Huber, did you have a comment?
So I'm going to disagree with Councilman Whitaker. While I agree that this is about access, we're not going to get the access if we don't have a competent group that's mapping out the plan to actually provide the access. So right now we have a forward-leaning infrastructure installed. We're out ahead of any other community in Hampton Roads, but it does nothing until you plug it in. And so figuring out how we plug it in, who we plug it in with, where we plug it in, and then how we market and use it. So I work for an IT company. I ain't an expert in that. And I don't think there's any experts in the room except maybe for the two folks sitting across the table from me. And so it seems to me that if we're gonna continue leaning in and go execute a plan that actually brings this to life, and we take advantage of the forward-leaning investment that's already been made, that the only way we're going to get there is to have competent people who understand the technical requirements to be able to do what we're talking about doing.
Yeah, the access again, as you look at those boards that I named, access to contracts and doing business, that is going forward without the expertise that has been stated. Also, this board meets once a month. Is that so? Once a month, you're not going to be doing the day-to-day operations. That's going to be left. The expertise is to those who are within the city attorney's office, IT. That's where the expertise will come. And so the competency issue is not going to be driven from this board on the day-to-day operations of what is needed for this ring. So that's why I said the whole competency issue is just a distraction. It's about access to information and power.
I just want to ask a question, and this is to my colleagues on the authority. Is it fair to think or consider that individuals that would be on the board and coming from different types of organizations or training that brings more information that will help us to make more informed decisions, is it fair to think that having those people on a board who deal with this kind of stuff and understand what it means and how to navigate and make sure that we don't make mistakes and have to redo things perhaps and confer with our city staff and others, is it fair to think that bringing on subject matter experts could not improve a situation? I'm just asking.
Can I answer? Yes. This board is not a day-to-day operation. It is. It would be more like a policy setting board like the others are. So as far as the subject matter expert, again, that's not the litmus test for the others, and they run and they contract. So I don't see really the point of why it has to be subject matter experts when we're talking about policy that this board will not generate. It would be recommendations of policies that would be adopted.
Okay, Mr. Moody, and then we're going to move to our continue. I think we have a couple more pages of it.
Well, obviously, there's some philosophical differences on those two things, and I think at the proper time, Madam Chairman, we're going to have to make a decision through consensus on which direction that we're going to go.
All right. So with that, thank you for the discussion, gentlemen, and we'll proceed with the presentation.
So next, I just want to update you on what's happening with the regional ring, because that does, like I said, have a strong effect on this authority and what you can do with our ring. So the regional ring and the Southside Network Authority is different from the Portsmouth ring and this authority. The Southside Network Authority formed in 2019. 5 Southside cities each have 1/5 equity ownership in the SNA. Everybody has 1 vote, and as a benefit of that, we also get 6 strands when that ring is completed. So that is 110 miles, and importantly for us, it will run next to our ring for about a mile, and then it goes to Virginia Beach, into to the area with the internet hub. So that provides a lot more opportunities for both our own internet needs, and then also anybody who wants to connect to our ring after this is complete. Construction started last year. It actually started in Portsmouth first. This is where they got all their permits and approvals first. And I believe they're almost done if they haven't already finished in Portsmouth. Also, the city will be getting $1.3 million as an in-kind contribution, because when the city built its ring, it knew that there were some bridges that the regional ring would need to pass through, and so it intentionally built with extra capacity that now it is gifting to the Network Authority in exchange for $1.3 million. And that agreement that sets out that exchange will be coming to council sometime in the next several months. The Southside Network Authority is currently negotiating a comprehensive agreement with GPS, who's a local contractor for the management, operation, maintenance, and marketing of the ring. If you go to the next page, you can see this is where the Southside Network Authority ring is, and that in red is the portion that is in Portsmouth. So that's not Portsmouth's ring. They do run parallel for a stretch, but. So just general talk about next steps is that the city's procuring a new fiber consultant that's going to be more focused on how to best utilize the ring, including that excess capacity, to accomplish the goals that we talked about, like more affordable internet to people who can't afford it, better speed, just overall how do we leverage this. And that consultant can then work with this authority to craft an RFP or to figure out how to better market that. And the city itself is working on its next phase to get the equipment and the building so that it can use the fiber ring itself. And I think Mimi has some more status updates.
Yes, so I'm going to defer to our CIO, Cliff Hayes, that will give you a quick update on the status of our ring.
Thank you, Madam Interim Manager. So where we are now is, it looks like about 95% of the actual construction and the laying of the ring itself. However, there is a parallel requirement as the Churchland Bridge has not finished its portion, the construction there. But once that's complete, we'll be able to complete the rest of the other 5% of the ring that needs to come to fruition. And that is out off of Cedar Lane in a piece of property that's owned by the city, a radio station or something out there. And then once we run to that last portion, then we'll be able to say that we've completed the construction of the dark fiber of the actual infrastructure of the ring itself.
Yes, Dr. Whitaker.
And that total investment in this ring, was that figure, was it around $30 million?
No, it was, don't know the exact figure, but it was more like 10.
Yeah.
10 million?
Yeah. And the 1.3 in-kind, how will that benefit the city moving forward?
So when that portion was constructed as part of the city's ring, the city intentionally basically put a really big conduit that can hold way more fiber strands than we knew that we needed. And so we're just letting the Southside Network Authority use some of that extra conduit, and we're getting $1.3 million for that. And I don't know what the cost differential was between installing that extra large conduit and whatever conduit we need, but it was far less than 1.2.
And I would add, that's huge to the regional ring because the regional authority, network authority, would have to go through also, I think state agencies, VDOT, I think had a part of it or something, and they knew trying to get those permits, et cetera. Who knows how long that process would be like. The fact that strategically Portsmouth has already laid that piece out, then that in-kind attorney mentioned is going to be beneficial to the city. Puts you in a great posture to be able to offer that to the regional ring.
Any other comments? Members, let's see who goes.
So this is a question out of ignorance as a new guy. So we had a plan that built the ring, and we're almost done. Presumably that plan didn't end with building the ring, it ended with lighting the ring. So where do we stand on implementing that plan? And where is that plan? And what is that plan? And who owns that plan?
Well, I would say from observation that, these phases, there are different phases to the project's completion and getting to the point of lighting it up. But there are other steps involved, and the actual construction is what I'm seeing, that we're at 95% of that right now. In terms of moving forward and lighting it up, again, there's going to have to be some need to work with an ISP in order to, I mean, this ring, as you mentioned before, you're knowledgeable that it's not actually touching the internet per se. But at some point, you're going to have some conversations with an ISP in order to do so. So the advantage of the city having drawn your own ring like this is that whatever that ISP ends up being in your contractual conversations or negotiations, that much you can take off the table because you'll have your own ring. They won't have to say, hey, come ride on our infrastructure. We're just going to offer you access to the internet itself. So,
Mr. Moody.
Well, I think to follow up on Mark's comment, I think it'd be good to have a timeline, and also who's going to do what, who does have ownership of it, and seeing that the timeline's going to be met, and when is it going to be implemented. The whole purpose was to garner revenue from the commercial sector, if my memory is correct. So when are we going to start getting a return on investment, in other words?
Right.
so just to that point, I would say the major benefit is going to happen with the undersea cables. So with the cables and the high speeds that none of us are able to experience right now, anywhere near those type of speeds, we will have access to. And because you have your own ring, when it comes to your businesses for economic development purposes or negotiation, you will be able to offer to them, you know, I guess rates or access that theoretically may be better than being somewhere else where you just don't have that type of leverage in some of the other localities.
And some of the importance of getting it lit is, I think the city was going to realize a considerable savings by being part of it. I forget what that number, Ms. Ringa, do you remember what that number was?
760 some thousand. It's about a $700,000 difference of savings, I should say.
Right.
Dr. Whitaker and then Mr. Huber.
Just to make sure, again, not confusing terms. When you spoke of the need for an ISP, and when Member Hugo spoke about the lighting of the ring is not contingent on the city's use of the ring is not contingent on the lighting of it through an ISP. That is what it was originally built for, was for the city to receive a savings on its internal workings.
Yes, well, the savings only, we still need an ISP to light it. We don't need to go to the internet hub in Virginia Beach. Was that your question?
Well, what I'm asking is, when we speak of it being completed, when will the city be able to use it? And will there need to be an ISP in order for the city to use that?
Yes, there will.
Okay. And so once that's negotiated, the return for the city is the savings that the city estimated over a 10-year period. What we're speaking of is the selling of the dark fiber to outside entities in order for the city to make additional revenues. So the proposition as far as the fiber is concerned, the ring is concerned, is the savings to the city. Anything in addition to that through dark fiber is like icing on the cake.
Correct.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay, Mr. Hugo?
It will be the authority.
Authority.
The dark fiber.
Right, not the city, yeah.
Okay, so back to lighten up the ring, because at the end of the day, a dark ring is interesting if you are a data center and you're interested in moving data, but that's not the city. The city's interested in getting internet service. So we got to light up the ring.
Right.
I assume that the next phase of the plan wasn't to go connect to Cox, but rather to get to Virginia Beach, so that eventually, when Virginia Beach is lit up by the cable coming ashore, now we're not beholden to Cox. We're plugged into 5G, the very best possible service, and that service through whatever internet service provider, that conglomeration of folks that eventually are going to be sitting at and making their service available. Isn't that where the real savings comes from?
Well, from my understanding, that cost savings model was actually built on the idea that we would just be having somebody like Cox put that internet in. Getting to Virginia Beach is just additional benefits because at the time from what I understand, at the time that the CIP was done, the regional ring was kind of this pie in the sky idea that a lot of people thought would never get done. So we didn't want to rely on that as being our only method of accessing the internet hub in Virginia Beach. So the cost savings model works even if that never happens. It's just more beneficial when that happens because that further drives down cost and then again makes this authority and the ability to leverage the ring for citizens work out a lot better.
You have to have internet.
Well, yeah, and not only that, but it offers us the opportunity to plug into the very best service on the planet.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, so to your access question, hey, we want to give access to Portsmouth to the very best service, and the way you get there is to take our dark ring, plug it into the service that's coming ashore in Virginia Beach, and lighten up our ring with that service. Presumably, that's what the plan ought to be.
Yeah, and we've paid for access. I mean, the 5 members have already paid $20 million to have this access. That's what we voted on as a council, as an authority.
So does the community ring get lit by the Virginia Beach hub?
I mean, that's a
Loaded question.
yes, that's a much longer conversation, but the short version is that the regional ring is just going to be dark fiber, and then the cities themselves can find their own. They'll have access to that dark fiber.
Yep.
How they want to light it is up to them. So they will
Okay,
have.
does the regional ring have access to the Virginia Beach hub?
Yeah, they've
So
built out
presumably,
their-
we could just buy strands on the regional
Well, we don't-
regional ring to connect our loop to Virginia Beach,
We
yes?
have that.
Right, well, we already have access to strands.
Okay.
The city already has access
paid
to
$20 million
strands
for that.
as part of the equity ownership.
That's our percentage. It's a deeper conversation. I think that we just need to bring everybody up again because there's just a lot of questions.
Yes.
And I think it's just so that we all walk away with a full understanding. And it's almost like we were talking earlier, it's like you have Cox Cable for your internet and you have streaming. So I have Cox Cable for my internet, but I don't have Cox Cable. I have Cox, but I use it for internet streaming, and I have another, I won't say I'm not free advertising here, but I have a streaming device that I can tap into all different
Right.
in order to have live TV. Yeah.
Did you have one?
For our next meeting, can we have a closed session to discuss the ISP issue? Because I have a question about that. I don't want it to interfere with any type of negotiations that we may have with ISP companies.
Do you mind? Chair,
Yes.
what I would like to do moving forward, though, is Ms. Swinger was, Ms. Kelsey was very instrumental in getting us policy, getting us to this point, but this definitely should fall in the hands of the CIO, who is our Chief Information Officer, and he's going to be leading these moving forward because this is technology at its finest. And so since we do have someone here that has the ability to direct us in information, I want to kind of take it off and out of the attorney's hands. Not that she won't be an intricate part in giving us information and direction, but clearly he's the CIO, and I just kind of want to direct him, Cliff Hayes, to give us the guidance that we need technology-wise.
That can still happen in a closed session.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I have it's a specific question that I want to ask about the ISP, and I don't want it to interfere with what the authority may be doing in negotiating pricing. And it's a question that I have.
Yeah, that's a future business topic that we could add.
Yeah, for closed session.
For closed
I
session.
wanna ask, yeah.
Okay. Council members, in the interest of time, are there any other business topics that you would like to hear? I know we want to go back to the idea of the resolution and changing that, so that's one that you all would like to
Yes.
see on. Okay. All right. And is there anything?
At the next meeting also, can we revisit the Wi-Fi discussion for the public house? Was it only public housing, or was it also low-income areas?
There's already infrastructure at public housing, and there was a discussion about the feasibility of expanding that to more low-income housing.
And I think there was a map that was shown, and so can that be revisited at the next meeting as well?
Was that Dr. Whitaker review of?
Review the access for
Okay,
public
communities.
housing in low-income
Right.
communities.
And members, are there any other topics? Okay, we also, we have our next meeting set for March 14th at 4 o'clock next month. And we're at the end of our time. We don't have any speakers, okay? All right, so with that being said, entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
As a second?
Second.
Okay. We need a roll call for that? No. Okay, we are closed. Thank you.